Bill C5, National Projects of Interest, Major Projects Office. Does any of that confuse you? Are you wondering what all that means and how it affects your business, your career, or your family? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about today. But before I do that, let me just quickly let you know what it is that I'm doing. I've had some comments on my videos that I want to clarify. I do not get paid to make these videos. I do not work for anyone. I am not attached to the Prime Minister or his office in any way. Yes, I did volunteer to help one of the MPs gain their seat, and I do sit on a board for a residential district for the Liberal Party. But I'm trying to give you the facts as I see them. That's the purpose of these videos. I let you know where I stand politically, just so that you understand where my bias is. But the point of these videos is to give you the facts after watching all the press conferences on CPAC, the question and answer period, the reading the news, watching the news, listening to other proponents on both sides of the aisle to try and figure out what are the real facts. What does these things mean the government's doing? What do these bills and legislation and offices mean for your business, your career, and your family, so that you can position yourself to take advantage of opportunities or to get out of the way of any adverse reactions. So I'm trying to give you the facts as I see them, but now at least you know my bias, although I am not trying to make you vote any which way, okay? So back to Bill C5. Bill C5 was passed in June, and it was passed really, really fast, and faster than most legislation goes through because, well, it's important. And afterwards, the Prime Minister did meet with the Indigenous communities to explain that this bill does not infringe on their rights, and it's really there to help them and provide an opportunity for them to not only be consulted, because Bill C5 five times says that they must be consulted on every project, but they also have access to purchase equity in the project so that they can make money off the revenue from the project. Now, if you don't know anything about the Indian Act, kind of outlines where the Indigenous communities are and all of their rights and stuff, but they can't use their lands as collateral at a bank. So they can't go to the bank and borrow money, especially the amount of money that they would need to borrow to buy into a project. So the government has created a fund for them to borrow money to invest into the equity portion of the project so they can make revenue in the future, but they must pay back that loan, okay? This isn't the government giving them money, it's a loan. And their government's just being their bank because the government says that they can't use their land as collateral, okay? Let's get into what makes a project of national interest, because that really is what comes down to it. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, well, I want to, like a lot of the Indigenous people are like, well, we want a school. Premiers are saying, well, we want a hospital. Or Doug Ford was wanting a tunnel built. But not all projects are projects of national interest. And not all projects are going to make it onto this list. And basically the list, it's a living list. Projects are going to come on, projects are going to go off. But they must meet 5 criteria to get on the list. So these 5 criteria, let's go through them. So they must strengthen Canada's autonomy, resiliency, and security. So does it have a defense component? Like a port in Churchill can also be used as a military port. So there's the security of it. Will it help Canada be resilient? And that's where we get the economy and having diversity of partnerships. So is the project going to be providing something that companies in Europe or Asia are going to want to buy instead of just the US. And autonomy. So is it a project going to ensure that Canada remains sovereign and that Canada's economy is growing to benefit the country, to ensure that we're not overtaken? So where is it helping the tariffed industries? That's a big one. Is it ensuring that we can break away from the state's dominance? All of these things matter. So it's definitely about our economy and our defense. So B, the second thing is, does it provide economic or other benefits to Canada? So what are the economic benefits? We've already talked about those. But what are the other benefits? Well, you got defense. Defense is a very important benefit. I can't think of other benefits, and I haven't really heard any other benefits when I've been listening to the news. But because this isn't about your town getting a hospital or your region getting a school, it's definitely more about national, how's this going to help us on a macro level. Now, the third thing is have a high likelihood of successful execution. Now, one of the big criticisms, especially from Polyev, about the first 5 projects to be announced, to be managed by the Major Projects Office, they all have a high likelihood of successful execution because they're already half done. They're already almost, either shovels are about to go in the ground or they've already been in the ground. But there's still some things that need to be addressed for it to get to operational. Whether like with the port in Montreal, there is rare fish that may cause the production or the port's expansion to be stopped or put on pause. So the Major Projects Office is coming in to help navigate the bureaucracy and the legislation that protects that fish, and will help to also ensure that the expansion can take place. So that's why those projects are on there, even though they're already almost done. Now the advance, so I want to go back to that, having likelihood of successful execution. So that's where the second list of projects that are almost there. These are projects that there's the people that are bringing it to the table are still having to fill the holes, fill the gaps to ensure that, yes, you know what, we've got the Indigenous people here. We've looked at we understand the economy. We've got a proponent. We got investors. We've got the regulators. We've got everybody here at the table. That is what the Major Projects Office is looking for in order to say, okay, this is ready to go. So we're going to put it on the list because it's actually going to happen and we're not going to have any court battles. That's the big thing that we're trying to avoid with this office. If a project is coming on and it doesn't have, and there might be court battles because it's not consulting the native or the Indigenous population, or it doesn't have the investors behind it, or something, there's something missing, it's not going to get on the list. So advance the interests of Indigenous peoples. Well, as I told you, it's 5 times it says they got to be consulted. Not only do they have to be consulted, we've created this bank fund. As well, there is going to be a council on, so a council at the Major Projects Office where First Nations, Métis, and Indigenous leaders are going to be sitting, and they're going to be part of the process of how to, like, which projects do they think are going to be on the list to move forward, which projects still need some work, and which projects are not going to make it at all because they just do not have the Indigenous, enough Indigenous support. and they must contribute to clean growth and meeting Canada's objectives with respect to climate change. So we're not getting rid of our environmental targets or legislation, but we do need to be able to maneuver through it in order to ensure, okay, is this the best option? Is this the cleanest option? Is there maybe a cleaner option? Is there something else we can do? So there's something there to ensure that, you know, we are going to be looking at the environment. We are going to make sure that it is hitting those targets. If there's something and that the legislation is going to get in the way, yes, the Bill C5 does have a way to say, look, we're just going to go ahead anyway. There are certain projects where they're going to just say, yep, we're going to go ahead anyway. But for the most part, the environment and the Indigenous people are front and center to this bill, to what makes a project of national interest. Now, what about this major projects office? What is it? So one of the big misnomers of Bill C5, this list and the major project office, is that the government is going to be putting up a bunch of money to build these projects. That is not the truth. That is not right. The government isn't going to be shelling out a bunch of tax money to build a pipeline or a port or something else. That is not the purpose of the major projects office or the list. The government has created an office that will facilitate the process. And now you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, just another thing of bureaucracy. That's the left, the right. The right's going on, well, it's just another layer of bureaucracy. And you're not getting rid of the legislation that's making it hard for companies, and investors aren't going to want to come back and blah, 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 blah. Well, here's the thing. The major projects office is going to facilitate the process to ensure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, to ensure that it doesn't end up in court. It's also going to be ensuring that everybody is doing their best in the process. So, you know, I learned a lot of things when I was volunteering. And one of the things, because I'm not a big Trudeau fan, I am actually anti-Trudeau. So learning that things sat on his desk waiting for a signature, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. That his team was, oh, well, we'll come in when we come in and we'll do the work when we do the work. Not surprising. So, but the major projects office is going to make sure that these things are not sitting on people's desks waiting for a signature, that when there is a question, the answer is going to be able to be answered because the people that have the answer are going to be at the table during the meeting, so that we're not constantly having meetings saying, well, we'll get that answer, and never get the answer. I guess a lot of businesses were saying that they didn't even know that there was a holdup with their project because nobody called them to ask them the questions that they were asking in the meetings, and they weren't in those meetings. So all of this stuff, it really just gives a hub to facilitate the project. It ensures that somebody has responsibility, that they're able to pick up the ball and they're going to run with it, and they're going to have accountability. They're going to keep people accountable, and they're going to be responsible for that project getting built and going into operation. Because right now, as you probably know, I mean, up until now, the government has just been the government. The bureaucracy has just been bureaucracy, and nobody had responsibility to ensure that these projects were actually going to get to operation. There were nice ideas, you know, they created the catalog of, like for housing, Trudeau created the catalog of housing plans to make it easier for people to build projects so that they didn't have to pay for architects. And these were all pre-approved by the municipalities, so it sped it up. So all of that would happen under Trudeau, but he just didn't know how to get it to all work together in order to get it built. It kind of just sat there and wasn't really, I mean, it was communicated, but it just basically there was stuff that was happening, but it wasn't done in a timely manner. There's nobody responsible to make sure that these things happened. And hopefully now with the Major Projects Office, we have someone that will make things happen. So who do we have in this role? So the CEO of the Major Projects Office, her name is Dawn Farrell. Now, Dawn Farrell she's held senior executive roles at BC Hydro and TransAlta, both electric companies, before overseeing the completion of the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion as the CEO. So she's worked in the electricity world. She's from Western Canada. The office is actually going to be in Calgary. And she has experience getting something as complicated and controversial finished as the Trans Mountain pipeline, which is the only pipeline that gets to the BC coast. So she understands the process. Now, a lot of people say a lot of really great things about her, and even Danielle Smith in Alberta, she says she thinks that she's an advisor. She considers her an advisor and a friend. So these are definitely reasons why they've hired her. Now, if you've listened to some of my other videos, you will know that at one point people were saying, well, Carney surrounded himself with people from Quebec. But when I was watching that Curse of Politics podcast, they were talking about these men that were surrounding Carney and in his inner circle all being from Quebec, and is that a problem? The one girl on the panel of Curse of Politics said, well, there's one other thing. They're all men. And the other men in the podcast were like, oh, yeah, we didn't even think of that. Because that's what bias is. They noticed that there wasn't anyone non-Quebec because they're all non-Quebec. But they didn't realize that there was no women in the inner circle. So Dawn Farrell is a woman who will be in that inner circle and provide that female voice that's very necessary in politics. But let's look at some of the projects. So 5 projects were announced to be managed by the Major Projects Office. So they're overseen, facilitated. Does not mean that the government is shelling money out for these projects. It just means that Dawn Farrell is putting together a team to make sure that these projects get done. Now, I've worked in manufacturing where I was brought in, they were $8 million behind in deliverables. We didn't have any clue where, it was just a nightmare. We didn't know what project was where. So my job every morning was to phone my clients, not my personal clients, but the clients I was responsible for, and ask them what they needed me to get out the door that day. And then I would go to a meeting and compete with the other people that were expediting these orders to get my order approved to be one of the ones to get out that day. Then I would run around the floor, the manufacturing floor, to find the leader or the supervisor of each section, whether it was the welding or the dipping or the powder. Anyway, it was manufacturing. So there's all these, everything from bending the metal to painting the metal to putting silk screening the metal. There was a lot going on. But it was my job to go around, find the orders, find out where they were in that process, and then get them pushed through to get out that day. So that is basically what the MPO does. The MPO will be seeing where these projects are in the process, figure out, okay, what needs to be done next, and get the person that's supposed to be getting it done next, getting it done. And figuring out, okay, so how can we ensure that we're going to be able to get this done and meet the legislation that's in place? And if we can't meet the legislation that's in place, what's more important, the legislation or the project? So there's gonna be a lot of that kind of stuff happening in this MPO, okay? Let's look at the projects that were approved, because these are projects that are already in the go and are already mean, it's just going to be easy for them to get them done and out the door. But they're going to be watched. So I'm going to tell you which companies they are, so that if your business or your career can be impacted, or an opportunity might be happening for you in the future, like let's say you are a mechanical engineer and you know that the project that you're working on is coming up and you're going to be looking for that next project. Well, you know, maybe there's places, or let's see where they're at, because maybe you're going to want to move your family to be closer to where the work is going to be happening, so that you may not be directly involved in the project, but you know that you're going to be able to get work from the community around that's going to be growing thanks to the project that's happening in that community. Okay, so first one is LNG Canada Phase 2 in Kitimat. Now, the proponent is LNG Canada, and there's actually another program, LNG project in Kitimat as well that is on its way, and it's the Cedar LNG. It's so there's more LNG happening in the area. It's not just the one that's been built, and this one, there's another one as well. So this project doubles it. It'll contribute to our GDP growth. It's supposed to attract 33 billion in private sector capital, and it's going to support jobs and economic growth in the local community. It's a low carbon industry. Creating something that is in demand in Asia and Europe, and the major project office will ensure that the final work on the LNG Canada will create pathways for other proponents of LNG projects that are strategic to the nation. So it's going to have a process, a checklist. They're creating a roadmap for other LNG projects to be created, not only just in BC, but also on the East Coast. The Darlington New nuclear plant in Ontario. So this is Ontario. The company is Ontario Power Generation. So we'll be the first G7 country to have an operational small modular reactor. It's the first of 4 planned small modular reactors for clean power up to 300,000 homes, while supporting 200 high-paid jobs, plus another 1,600 jobs during construction. And the project has the potential to position Canada as a leader across Canada for export as early as 2030. Okay, so if you want to work constructing the nuclear power plant, or maybe you are going to school to learn something about nuclear power, Ontario may be where you're looking to look for work in the future. Check with Ontario Power Generation, Google their website, see if they're hiring, what kind of jobs do they hire for, what do you need, is there any skills that you can be getting, that kind of thing. The Contrecoeur Terminal Container Project in Quebec. Now this is north of Montreal, and this proponent is the Montreal Port Authority. And it's to just increase the container capacity to 60% to keep goods moving and meet demand and diversity of trade routes. And it will deploy AI capabilities to strengthen supply chains, create thousands of jobs, and generate lasting economic benefits across Quebec and Canada. So if you're in AI and have to do supply chains, this may be a company that you are wanting to go and talk to. Maybe they need what it is that you have. Even if they've got somebody in that position, they may need a backup. You never, ever know without asking. So Montreal Port Authority may be somewhere that you want to be finding people to go to have coffee with and learning what it is that they're doing, what it is that they need, to see if you can get your foot in the door. Another one is the McIlvenna Bay Foreign Copper Mine Project in Saskatchewan. Now, this is one of the richest mineral belts with a supply of copper and zinc, and it's going to make us a global supplier of critical minerals for clean energy, advanced manufacturing, modern infrastructure, and it will create hundreds of jobs, boost local economies, and will be one of the lowest emission operations of its kind, which is great. Now, if you've been listening to my videos, you'll know that Germany wants our critical minerals, and we've already got a contract for one mining company to supply copper, and they need more of our copper. So another copper mine is a good thing. And Teck Teck, which is a BC mining company, has expanded its operation double capacity so that it can provide more copper. Now Teck has, as a mining company, there's a company that's trying to buy them, but that's a whole other video. So we'll go into that another day. Now, Red Chris mine expansion. This is the Newmont Mining and Imperial Metals is the proponent for this one, and it's in Northwest BC. And it's copper again, and it's going to employ 1,500 workers with a peak of 1,800. And it's going to be working with the Indigenous people. So it's got a lot going on there. The mine is a proposal for Northwest Critical Conservation Corridor. And the corridor is being moved to the MPO for consideration as it presents opportunities for critical mineral developments, clean power transmissions, Indigenous project leadership, and potential new conservation area the size of Greece. So those 5 projects kind of give us an idea of what is seen as a national project. Energy-based, has something to do with trade or mining, getting those critical minerals out of the ground, so that we can send them to Germany, Asia, as well as the States. Now, there is something here about the transformative strategies. And I just want to get this right. So these cover, so I'm just going to read this so that you can understand it. The government wants to make sure the projects in national interest advance quickly. Building on this goal, the Prime Minister directed the Major Projects Office to transform regulatory processes to provide the certainty that all major projects are reviewed within 2 years from start to finish. That is what the MPO is all about, is making sure that regulatory processes are standardized and dealt with quickly so that we can get these projects from concept to shovels in the ground within 2 years. Now, there are transformational projects for Canada. These cover critical mineral development, wind energy, critical infrastructure in the north, ports, and transportation infrastructure connecting Canadians and our goods with the world, as well as innovative carbon capture and storage, carbon management technologies, and all meet the criteria of growth, security, diversification of markets, and reconciliation. The concepts and projects that fit within these nation-building strategies have boundless potential, but are at the early stage and require further development. The Prime Minister also directed the Major Projects Office to create business development teams to work with provinces, territories, proponents, and Indigenous peoples to further develop and make these nation-building projects a reality. Okay, so they want projects in critical mineral strategy, wind, West Atlantic energy, Pathways Plus, Arctic economic and security corridor, Port of Churchill, and Alto high-speed rail. That's the rail that goes from Toronto to Quebec City that they're trying to put in. Now, the Major Projects Office has a website, and it offers proponents of selected projects. So the Major Projects Office is a catalyst for the private sector participation and investment Canada needs to build big and build fast. It is the single window for proponents, Indigenous communities, and governments to help identify and fast-track nation-building projects that will grow Canada's economy. So the whole point of it is to be a one-stop shop, to be able to match investors with projects, with companies, with the Indigenous community and the premiers to get a project from idea right through to regulatory approvals and shovels in the ground. It's not about the government making a list of projects and then saying they're going to pay for them. That's not what it is. Okay. So the major building projects does have a website. And if you just Google major projects office, I'm sure you will get it. The URL is really kind of long. I'll put it in the comments or in the description on YouTube. But there's something there. So if you want to know more about what the office is, how do they support proponents, the project map, all of it, it's there ready for you to go and get informed. Why is it important? Well, this is where you're going to find out where these big projects are, where these jobs are going to be, where your business maybe can get in there, where you can invest your own money. There's a lot that is in there. So make sure you take a moment to Google Major Projects Office of Canada, go to their website, and find out for yourself how you can position your business, your career, or your family to take advantage of the growth that Canada is about to go through. Now, I talked about different projects that have been announced in the news on different videos about Atlantic Canada and how the Atlantic Canada wind project and hydrogen fuel projects are going to create wealth in Atlantic Canada, and there's going to be jobs there. Now, there's going to be jobs in Montreal for the Montreal Port Authority, but there's also going to be jobs in northern Manitoba around Churchill Port. There's jobs in Kitimat and Prince Rupert around LNG. And when these projects come into these communities that are not cities, that are in the rural northern areas, what happens is that they start to grow and other businesses start benefiting from the people that work there, getting built, the people that work there, having these big projects in those communities creates an economy that you and your family can benefit from. You just have to move. And that's a big problem for a lot of people who live in Vancouver, in Toronto. They want to be in the big city. They're not looking to move to these rural areas. And that's why we have things like the temporary foreign workers program. And then all these youth in the cities are unemployed. I had to move from BC to Calgary when I graduated because that's where the jobs were. Now we moved back to BC, which wasn't good for me, but once we'd made enough money there and we could afford to live in BC, that's what we did. Because if you know anything about BC, BC means bring cash. It's expensive to live here, but there's opportunity for you in these new communities that are going to be experiencing exponential growth over the next 5 to 10 years. If you have kids that are in high school, there's new trades and new jobs that are careers that are going to be developed thanks to these programs, whether it's using AI or building that small nuclear reactor thing for electricity. We're going to have major electric or hydro projects, major hydro projects, because BC wants to create a line from BC to Yukon. Manitoba wants to create a line from Manitoba to Nunavut. And if you want to be a lineman, it's a great, my brother's a lineman. It's a great trade for someone that wants to get into a trade. Unionized, it's a good job. And they're going to need new people. And let me tell you, they need people that know how to work hard and that will work hard. It's not an easy job. You're the one up on that pole when the snow's flying and the rain's coming down. So there's a reason why they get paid well. They get a lot of perks. But there has been a lack of really old-fashioned Canadian work hard type of people. teaching your children to work. That's another video that I think I'm going to need to do one day, because one thing I know about my kids, they work hard, they know how to work, and they know how to be good employees, but their friends are struggling, and there's a reason. So work is a big piece of what we need. Trust me. I work on a contract basis. So I'm constantly looking for that new contract, constantly looking for that next speaking gig, constantly looking for that next client that needs some research or some coaching or just a soundboard to help them solve a problem. I'm constantly looking for work, but yet I'm not considered unemployed, though really I'm perpetually unemployed. So we have an economy filled with people like me who are in danger. And that's why this new project, this new major projects office is so vital for the long-term benefit of Canada and myself and people like you, which is why I want to talk about exactly what it is. What are these projects? Where are they? What kind of things are they looking for? What do you need to be looking for? I hope that you understand more about why I'm making these videos, but at the same time, understand more about what the Major Projects Office is, what these projects mean to Canada and our future, and hopefully you find a way to position your business, your career, or your family to benefit from all of this growth that will be happening in the next 5 to 10 years. But if you're not paying attention, you're not going to benefit. Well, until next time, peel out.